Hey there, my name is Mariusz Becker, and today in part 4 of this series, I'll be finishing this image and we'll also do some color correction. And now I'm also adding some plants because while I like the image getting warmer, I felt like it needed some tones that counter those reddish and beige tones. So I'm using some plants to give the whole image some nicer color contrast, but also to make the office feel more alive and not as dead as it felt to me before. Also, those leaves are a nice compositional element that can also draw the eye into the frame, and this monitor in the middle is clearly my focal point here, so I'm using the leaves to kind of emphasize this. Also using some clouds, PNGs, to add some more interest to the sky, so it's not only blue. The building on the other side also needs some texturing, nothing complicated as it will be just seen through the window and also be a little bit blurry, but it's just there to make it feel a little bit more part of the scene. So using some simple techniques, a lot of triplanar mapping again, because I didn't see the need to unwrap this building. And then also, again, like always, using different sorts of maps to build up an interesting texture. This, in combination with some curvature, gave me the look I was going for, some thought of renovated industrial building. Same like the office, the whole scene is taking place in, so it shouldn't be too dirty, but it also shouldn't be too clean. Sort of striking the balance between those two states, which makes it feel interesting in the end. And also this changes the light that is bouncing into the room. As you can see, it's adding a lot more warmth to the image now that the building on the other side is warm as well. Then it's a matter of adjusting a lot of those elements. For example, the monitor, as I wanted to have a nice focal point, I decided to just do a mock-up of a Google search that is saying what does weightlessness feel like. It's nothing that you can actually see at that size, but I like those sort of Easter eggs which you can only see in the close-ups or when you zoom really far into the image. The image in the background was missing some color contrast with the chair in front of it, so I just threw in a color correct node and changed the hue a bit. As this image gets closer and closer to its final form, my adjustments get smaller and smaller, but also way pickier. So now it's really a matter of searching for those places that don't feel right, or those elements that aren't fully textured yet that need to be replaced to be considered final. So also small adjustments to the cables as they were sticking in the wall, as well as this air band in the back that you couldn't see before because it wasn't finished modeling. So just using a cloner for this to make it feel a little bit more believable, adding some screws to quickly finish off this model. It's really a matter of adjusting those details. Also, the cabinets were missing some proper shading. I thought about making it wood at the front and glossy white at the side, but this didn't feel right. So I opted for some wooden doors, but with some glossy paint all around. also trying to make the wheels more similar to the wheels I now got on the new office chairs. As you can see, you can't really even see the wheels, but as I said, I love adjusting details no one will ever see, and adding more and more little elements that now kind of populate the image, and using again some assets from the content browser and quickly shading this to make for a nicer variation. Also building some basic plastic shaders for the mouse, just some noise in the bump to make it feel a little bit more rough. But overall, like I said, the adjustments I'm doing now are those final 10%, I'd consider them. It's nothing that will drastically change the image overall, but in my eyes, this is what in the end makes the image good. So this is where I really spend a lot of time. As you can see, I'm not even sure which plant I want to use in the background, so adjusting this one and also using some techniques with object color ID or geometry ID in that case to drive the different hues of the leaves, which I will also show you in a quick tip later on. It is really a matter of fine-tuning all those elements, also adding now a few leaves at the foreground to draw the eye in, and spending way too much with the plant in the background because I couldn't find the right placement for it. But those are the details I usually spend way too much time on, but also I really enjoy doing those. We are now almost finished with the image, and the plant is still giving me a hard time. But now it's really the last steps, and I totally forgot to texture the papers, so I'm quickly doing that here. Just adding some backlight translucency to the paper to make it feel a little bit more real, so the light can shine through it, and then sending off the image for render. As I'm running two 2080 Ti's, I can take advantage of those RTX cores, and I'll show you how to activate that in your render settings. If you go to render settings and then on the Redshift, you can go to System and then click on Experimental Options, and here you can enable OptiX RT on supported GPUs, and this will allow your RTX cards to fully be taken advantage of in your render. So before sending my image off to render, I quickly want to go over the settings I'm using. Although those settings are always specific to the image you're currently working on, I still want to go over them. I'm using 32 and 256 for the unified sampling, as well as an error threshold of 0.005. This value tells Redshift what to determine clean and where to put more samples. And I'm also using some sample overrides for the reflection, refraction, and light samples. I could also use the new automatic sampling, but I haven't looked into it enough at that point to really say if this is an advantage or not for me right now. And then for the GI, I'm using 5 bounces with brute force and irradiance cache point cloud, and I'm using 4096 rays for my GI. And for the optimization, it's always dependent on how much glass or how much refractive and reflective surfaces you have in your scene, but those values work pretty well for this particular scene. And with those new RTX cards, I could also push this way further, but right now I don't need any more bounces, so I'm sticking with those values. So now after I rendered my image, I'm in Photoshop, and this is where I do my final adjustments to my render. My usual workflow is to convert my image for smart filters, so I can turn those off and on again, and then use the camera raw filter. This one is pretty much like Lightroom if you used that one before, but overall it's a raw editor for raw images, but in the end it works just like any other photo editor, and in my case I'm just super used to using Camera Raw or Lightroom for that matter, that I feel quite home using mostly that instead of layers with curve adjustments and color corrections, because I got it all in one tool here. And I think the image overall is a little bit too warm, yeah, maybe -2 or so, and a bit more magenta, so we get some nicer tones. And then overall maybe lowering the exposure and a little bit the contrast, but I want to bring up the highlights to sort of raise those and make those a little bit brighter, darkening the shadows, raising the whites again, and crushing the blacks a little bit. Dehaze is also a tool which allows you to sort of increase the contrast in your image, but it's a bit different compared to the contrast slider, because you can see if I increase the contrast, it looks different to what dehaze does. Dehaze also darkens your image a little bit. It's meant for using it when you got a lot of fog and haze, like the name suggests, in your image. Then dehaze really shines, but I like to use it on my renders as well, just a little bit, to sort of give it a little bit more contrast, a little bit more punch compared to using clarity, because clarity will desaturate your image and increase local contrast, and it looks like a bad HDR conversion, so I try to stay away from it. So after I did my adjustments here, and we can compare it, what we did so far, and now I'm moving to the curves. Usually I'm really working from top to bottom here, as it's just easier for me. And here again I'm raising the highlights a bit, the lights as well, and darkening the darks, but raising the shadows here again. So it's all sort of a balance between the settings I made previously and the settings I'm doing now, just to balance out my image and to give it the vibe I'm going for in the end. So what I really like to do is to raise the blacks. I think this gives it a nice filmic look, sort of, but this is just way too much. So we have to bring those down again a bit, and then get the curve back to a normal line, so the other tones aren't as affected. And this is what I mean, this looks pretty nice in my eyes. And with my other colors in my curves, I'm following a similar process, just using some points to kind of fix my line so it's not affecting the other tones too much, kind of trying to keep it as even as possible. And then it's just a matter of personal preference where you think your image should go. In my case, I'm just trying some different things. And I know this looks super extreme right now, but it's all about balancing those tones in the image here. I think this looks sort of nice. Yeah, kind of like those tones that we got going now. Yeah, it gives a nice warmth to the image. And from here we can go a bit further. You could also apply sharpening here, but I'm really not a big fan of adding sharpening. So the next thing I'm moving into is the color mixer. Here you can adjust all the different tones in your image individually. It's kind of like the hue saturation layer combined with a color correction node, sort of. And I just want to make my reds a little bit more orange. My yellows should be a bit more green, and my greens should be a little bit more bluish. It's not a lot, but you can definitely already see the difference. At least I can hear on my monitor. I'm not 100% sure if you can see it as well. It's just fine-tuning the tones in your image and determining where you feel like your image could use some work. And the greens overall are a bit too strong for me, especially here in the back. And you can see this is affecting them. So maybe around here. And also the blue in the sky is a little bit too much for me, so I want to lower that as well. Then just darkening the reds a little bit. Those orange tones I want to raise. Maybe I just want a little bit on that way. Yeah, maybe here. That feels good. And then those blues can go down in brightness because I feel like we are losing them right now. And this looks better to me. Yeah. This overall looks better to me. It desaturated and kind of brought the tones a bit more together. So I'm happy with that adjustment. And split toning is also something I use a little bit. This sort of can affect your highlights, but it can also affect your shadows. And with this slider you can determine, if I would raise this, then with this slider you can determine where your highlights start and where your shadows start. And by double clicking you can reset everything here. But I'm not too sure if this is the right tool right now. Maybe adding just a little bit of warmth into the image. Just a little bit in the shadows maybe. Maybe this. And then going to the effects, because every good image needs some grain. So I'm adding this as well. Like pretty high roughness. This feels good. Maybe a little bit less, but I really like the way grain sort of makes an image feel like everything kind of melts together and gets rid of this 3D-ish feeling. And now I want to also touch on the calibration. This also affects your colors in your image. You can use that to balance out your image as well, to affect all the green tones, all the blues and all the reds. Sometimes it makes it easier to do it that way, because you sort of combine all those different hues and not changing one individually, which can sometimes lead to artifacts, for example. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. What I want to do now is to make some local adjustments, and I'm using the adjustment brush for that. It is just a brush which also has all the settings you can find in Lightroom. So you could raise your exposure, maybe make your image colder, and also raise the magenta values, and then you can just brush over your image and it will apply everything. But the real good thing about it is that you can change everything afterwards again. So it's a really powerful tool to work in your image with. So I'm now just trying to make this monitor a little bit more readable, because I feel like we lost this monitor now in the color correction stage. So I think dehaze will do. Yeah. Just brushing off everything that got further than the monitor. Yeah, this looks nice. Maybe I try to... That's too much, but that way I can see better where I painted. So yeah, I think this is nice. Now I can actually see the Google logo again. But what I also want to do is I want to increase, or better said, emphasize this sunlight that gets through the window. So I'm resetting all the adjustments from the brush, and I will make it a little bit extreme. So I think, yeah, perfect. And then I can make it a little bit darker again. But I think something like this could be nice. Maybe I'll add a second layer to it. Just to make everything a little bit more focus towards the middle. And to also focus it a bit more towards the middle, I use another adjustment brush and brush over the bottom here and just turn down the exposure ever so slightly so we kind of tend to go upwards with our eye to the monitor in the middle. So that's it. That's my final image, and I really hope you enjoyed this overview of my workflow and this sort of tutorial. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for new videos. Bye.